Welcome to the Feds, insiders bringing accountability, integrity, and reform to a broken bureaucracy. At Feds for Freedom, we value constructive dissent and healthy debate. The views and opinions shared in today's episode are those of the speaker alone and do not express the views or opinions of the U.S. government or any other employer.
Today, we are talking with Melissa Bruckner. Melissa is one of our newer board members. She joined us this year with Feds as Feds for Med Freedom board member and has helped us. She has helped so much with the transition to Feds for Freedom. She's one of our hardest workers and has been very much involved in the organization and the structuring of our board and of our systems that we're getting into place. And so we're really happy to have Melissa on today. Melissa, welcome.
Thank you.
And Melissa, I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us about where you're from, where you grew up, kind of your background, and where you are today.
So I'm Melissa Bruckner, and I am from Yorba Linda, California, which is in Orange County, Southern California, about 50 miles south of Los Angeles. I spent my entire childhood there, grew up there. It was a wonderful place to grow up, very safe, family-oriented. My family, some of them still live there, and I visit pretty frequently. It's still conservative.
That area?
A little bit.
Tell me where it is again so everyone can move there.
Yorba Linda, California. That's 2 words, Yorba Linda.
Gotcha.
It
Okay.
is also known as the birthplace of one of our presidents, Richard M. Nixon. His presidential library is there. He is buried there. It's a great tourist attraction for anybody who wants to go see it. You can come to my hometown. It's wonderful.
Cool. Awesome. So you grew up in California. I'm assuming you went to school at some point. When did you leave the nest and where did you go from there?
So, yes, I graduated from high school in California, eventually made my way to New York City, went to Yeshiva University, which is not well known in the world at large, but it's basically the premier private Jewish university. Graduated from there with a degree in economics and went out into the big world of New York City, which is pretty crazy when you're 21 years old.
Did you always want to go to New York? Was that your dream growing up?
I actually never wanted to go to New York. I really never wanted to leave home. I mean, it was just, it's nice to be surrounded by what you know. But my father was a New Yorker. My mother went to college in New York, and they basically said, you have to leave the nest. Like, there's a big world out there, and, you have to be prepared for it. And now is the time to do that. So go and, just visit us.
Just come back. Just please call. Okay. So you went to school in New York. How did you end up in the federal government?
So after graduation, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. What does a person with an economics degree do? I'm still not really sure. I mean, you could work at the Federal Reserve, but or be a controller somewhere, but that never really interested me. So I jumped around a lot from different things. I worked in real estate. I worked in the Diamond District, which is really famous in New York City. I had a lot of different kind of like dead-end jobs, and as part of one of those, I met a woman who worked at the Social Security Administration, and, she gave me her card. I sent in my resume. I got a random call like a month later and went for an interview and then got hired.
Okay. And you've
Yeah.
been working with the Social Security Administration for how long?
Since 2005, so almost 19 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And today you are a senior management
Yeah,
position.
so I started as like a clerk behind the window, like one of those people that you come in who greets you and tries to help you. Worked my way up, got into management. I've been in management since 2014 consistently. And yeah, so now I'm a director in our headquarters, and I work on IT projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you just kind of fell into the government employee sphere of life. And have you enjoyed it? What has been your experience so far? I mean, before, let's say before 2020, what was your experience?
Really, I loved working at the Social Security Administration. I mean, I think one of the things I always wanted to do, although I never really like knew exactly how to do that, was to help people. And of all the federal agencies, Social Security is one of the few that has like real face-to-face contact with just the general public at large in America. I mean, we do a lot of things for Americans, including, giving out Social Security cards, but we help disabled people, retired people, people who really need us. And so you do have like a sense of satisfaction when you're working with the public every day to know that you are trying to do something good. And, for the most part, like the Social Security really prided itself on treating their employees well. I have been treated well there overall. So I was very proud to work there,
Great.
and very happy to be a federal employee.
Awesome. Okay. So let's fast forward then to 2020. COVID hits the world and impacts everyone differently. And everyone has a different story. So tell me what you started to see and how your opinions started to shape around the narrative that we were being told, and then how people were handling it, specifically the government.
So, I mean, I wasn't really worried about COVID. I kind of made up my mind with the beginning of all this that it just wasn't really going to make a big difference to me.
Even though you were in New York City and everyone's
Even though I was
like,
in New
"We're
York
all
City
dying."
and right, it was like the epicenter. And right. And then one day they just sent us home and said, well, you'll probably be home for 2 weeks, right? Of course. And then that got
2 weeks to
extended
slow the spread.
to a month, to 2 months. It was like we never knew when we were coming back to work. Really, my concerns started happening when they started having all the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter
Right, leading
riots in
up,
New York
yeah.
City. And it started getting really dangerous to be out on the street. And the governor of New York started letting people out of jails to slow the spread in the jail populations. I mean, it was all just like
Wild.
totally ridiculous. So that was my main concern. It was more like a safety thing, not like a COVID thing.
Yeah.
I'm not really a big follower of the news because I think it's just propaganda and nonsense. But, the one thing I was watching the whole time was just the numbers, right? Like they were just really trying to create fear in the public, posting the number of cases, of hospitalizations and death. But like I'm a math person and I can figure these, you can figure this out. If you have, 100,000 people who are sick and, 1,000 of them die, why is that something I need to be worried about when they're saying, oh, well, these people are elderly or they have comorbidities? Well, I, thank God, am not either of those.
Yeah.
So
this isn't something that you're gonna,
right. I mean, I was a
cower in
little
the
worried for
corner
my
over.
mother.
Right.
Right.
We take care of the ones that we know are at risk, and the rest of us continue onward, right?
Exactly. So for myself, like, I didn't really care. I went maskless as long as possible everywhere that I could. And people were like looking at me like I was totally nuts on the street because, like literally parting the seas to let me walk past them because they didn't want to be near me. But, I just didn't really care. I wasn't going to buy into it. So I don't like to live my life just thinking about fear and all the things that can go wrong. I wasn't going to change that for this.
Right. So when vaccines started to come out, and then
I was like, I don't need this.
Right.
I don't know why
Yeah.
anybody needs this. Like,
And then the president says all federal employees have to get this. What did you do?
I said no. I mean, my friends and I, we had been talking about it, and some of them were on the fence, and some of them were scared and they wanted to do it, and right when the mandate came, like my friends were like, so you're going to do this now, right? And I was like, no, I
They
think
wanted
you
you to
might
get
have
on board.
misheard me. Like I said, I'm not going to do that. So I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But you'll lose your job. Okay, well, then I'll find another job. And that was kind of what I started preparing to do, was thinking about all the other things I might do instead of working for the federal government. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought that
And that
was the
didn't
reality of the
stress you
situation.
out like
Well, it
a
did.
lot.
I mean, I started preparing myself. So,
Okay.
like cutting back on unnecessary expenses. If I was going to be unemployed for a while, I needed to save money. And, thinking about if I was going to have to move, I live by myself, how was I going to take care of myself? So, just kind of like preparing,
Very
getting all my
practical.
medical appointments in
Wow.
before
Yeah.
they cut off my insurance, right?
Yeah.
So all that kind of stuff. I just went like straight into planning. And, I had been reading online that they were going to allow religious accommodations. So I started doing a little research on how I could write a religious accommodation. And, when they finally like put the policy out there, like you either show us a picture of your vaccine card or you submit an accommodation. The first day, bam, like I had
You
it
were
written.
ready.
I
You
was
were ready.
ready.
You were a
Exactly.
go-getter. You knew exactly what to do.
So yeah, I mean, even my supervisor was like, whoa, like, how did you have this ready in time? I mean, I was preparing. So, and I was very open with my bosses. I told them, I'm not going to do this. You'll have an accommodation from me and you do what you need to do. I'm going to do what I need to do.
Yeah. As we've merged into Feds for Freedom, this will be our last question. As we've merged into our new kind of brand and our new organization vision and mission, what is it that you are excited about and what you see us accomplishing, or what do you feel like is part of our mission that you really are ready to support and jump into?
So, I mean, I think the potential is really unlimited for our group. I would really like us to reach the American public more and do a thorough job of explaining to them what we know as federal employees, what our experience is, and show them that we have a lot of value, right? Because I think in general, people feel kind of negative towards public servants, right? I think everyone in their mind thinks, oh, the DMV, right? Like you wait on a long
The
line
worst.
and right, exactly. But like we have a lot of talent. A lot of us have a lot of talent. We have a lot of commitment. Many of us give our lives to serve Americans. And yeah, your average civil servant is not a hero, right? We're not saving lives every day, but actually we kind of are, right? It's just not in a uniform or with a gun in a military zone. I mean, we are doing important work that helps people, that keeps people safe, that promotes democracy and freedom and constitutional rights. And we are what keeps this country functioning. And I just think that we don't get enough credit for that. And what we are doing as an organization is even beyond that, right? Because we are just trying to correct all of the things that we know are going wrong in our federal system. So, I think just doing a good job of reaching other audiences. We focused a lot on federal employees, of course, for now, because we had an emergency, right? And we had to help our own. But now it's time to do what we do every day, which is help America.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we had more time, maybe after our break, we can talk about how the changes that you feel like would be effective, because that really is the power that we have as this organization. We have all these amazing people who are willing to step up and say these things are not how they should be within our federal agencies, and we need to improve them. We need to fix them. They're not serving the American people the way they should. And that's really what we can, I feel like we can bring from our organization, from so many of our members, is those solutions. And we are working to create new policy, create change and reform in our government to help improve all those things, to have transparency, to have integrity, more of those values that we're looking for within our federal government, and not just the political politicization. Is that the way you say it? That's a hard word. Politicization of our federal agencies. And it's important that we get back to the place where we are serving the American people first. So, all right. Well, thank you, Melissa. We are back with Melissa Bruckner, having a conversation about her and her background. And now we're going to ask a few more questions. I would love to know, Melissa, why is it, after all that you saw and experienced, that you decided that you had to get involved?
So, like I said earlier, I didn't really experience any discrimination at work because of my vaccine status and the choices that I made. In fact, I couldn't have asked for probably a better situation to be in as a federal employee at that time. But still, the future was uncertain. And, we never knew sort of when there was going to be enforcement, or if there was going to be enforcement of the mandate, and what would kind of happen. And, I was thinking about what my future would look like without my job, in the federal government. I had spent the majority of my adult life, working for one agency, and, built a career for myself, relationships, and it could just all be gone like in an instant. And in a situation like that, where you have just massive uncertainty and the threat of like total upheaval, all you want to do is know that you're not the only one, right? And you're not going through this whole process alone. So, I was thrilled when I heard, that Feds for Medical Freedom was an organization that had obtained the injunction against the administration through the lawsuit. So I joined right away. And, I started, reading the chats and reading the experiences of other people. And then, had the opportunity through my local chapter to meet some people. And then, you have like ideas of how we can improve and expand and do more. And, I expressed some of my opinions to my local chapter head, and she was like, you should probably share this with some of the leadership. So I did. And then, somebody said to me, well, maybe, you'd want to like run our PowerPoint for the biweekly calls that we were having at that point. So I got involved there. And then, that was kind of just the catalyst, and then somebody suggested to me, when you guys had the board solicitation last year, you have a lot of ideas, like you're willing to put in the time. Maybe you should run for the board. So I did. And, the rest is kind of history there.
Yes. And we are really glad you came on board, because there's a lot we've had to do and a lot of work ahead of us. And that brings me to my next question, which is, what are you excited about with the future of Feds for Freedom? And what are you looking forward to as we progress through this new chapter?
So, we all know that the vaccine mandates didn't just come to fruition overnight, right? Like, it wasn't just the brainchild of some evil genius, who woke up one day and said, we should just mandate vaccines, right? And do this thing. And now we have this opportunity. So let's pull the trigger now. No, I mean, there are 1,000 small sort of unnoticed things that have been happening in this country and within the federal service that have led us to a point where, an entire administration felt that mandating a medical procedure would be okay. And
they came to that level of comfort where they thought that
right,
would pass.
because 1,000 other things had come up and gone totally unnoticed or not really pursued
and not
by
held
people
accountable
who
for it.
felt that it was wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, when they had the opportunity to then make this massive move, they felt that the time was right? So, knowing that there are those thousands of small things that are happening every single day in the federal government that led us to this point, I don't ever want to get back to that, right? But that means in order to stop that from happening again, we have to start making those corrections in those other small things.
Yeah.
And there are just so many things that, the American public don't know about that are happening in the federal government where their taxpayer dollars are being spent every single day. And it's even available. It's out for public consumption, but
like,
people are
anyone can
just
find out.
not doing their due diligence as, even stewards of their own government, right? I mean, we all have a responsibility to keep our government in check, right?
Yeah.
We elect these people, we put them in office, we can take them out of office the same way.
Right.
And we have a responsibility to understand what is happening in our government and put a stop to it if we think that it's wrong.
Yeah.
So, just within my own agency, right, on our website, which is available to the public. I mean, this is not like proprietary information that I am giving out, right? So on January 20th, 2021, the president signed Executive Order 13985. So the first day in office, the very first day of this administration, this executive order was signed, advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. This executive order requires all federal agencies to pursue a comprehensive approach to advancing equity for all people of color and other people who have been historically underserved, marginalized, and adversely affected by persistent poverty and inequality. Okay, I mean, that sounds theoretically lovely. You want to help people, right?
Struggling.
Okay, fine. But practically speaking, what does that mean that we do, the changes that we have made at the Social Security Administration? This is posted on our blog, on our website. To reduce these barriers and ensure everyone has access to our services, our Equity Action Plan includes, and I'm only reading a few of these, increasing collection of race and ethnicity data to help understand whether our programs are equitably serving other applicants and beneficiaries, and decreasing burdens for people who identify as gender diverse or transgender in the Social Security number card application process. So what does that mean, practically speaking? That means that we have made changes to not only the data that we collect, but to the systems that collect this data. Practically speaking, that means that we have spent tens, hundreds, maybe millions of dollars to make these changes at taxpayer expense so that we can collect data on people's race when they come into our offices or apply for our programs, right? And their preferred gender, it's, now it's no longer F or M for female or male. The State Department started doing this on passports where they now allow an X, right? So now all of the federal agencies, right, are changing their systems to allow for an X, right? And this is a long-term process that takes a lot of time because, it's not like you just add a checkbox to a form. It doesn't really work that way, right? So you are expending resources, right, to make all of these whole-scale changes to collect this extra information and, like extraneous data that doesn't actually really help us serve you better. It doesn't matter what color your skin is.
But it creates equity.
I have a duty as an employee of the federal government to serve you and provide you with the best customer service, regardless of your skin color or your preferred pronouns or any of that.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not the government's business.
But because we are now collecting this information, right, we now have a campaign, right? So one of the things that like the American public doesn't really understand about the Social Security Administration is that we have two major programs, right? So one is the standard, what people think of as Social Security, right? Retirement, survivors, disability. You work for a living, you pay your taxes, you get to be a certain age, you go and apply for a retirement check, or you become disabled and you go and apply for disability. And based on your age and your earnings and, what sort of stage you're in, you end up with a check, right? And there are a whole host of other factors and a lengthy application process for how we do that. But that is like the standard of what the American public thinks of as the services that Social Security basically provides, right? Including, of course, getting your Social Security number, which for most Americans would happen when you're born. Okay. But we also run another program, which is called the Supplemental Security Income Program. And that program is separate from the Social Security Trust Fund, where all your FICA taxes go, right? The little line on your paycheck where you see money coming out, that money goes into the Social Security Trust Fund. But the general fund, which is where this money from the Supplemental Security Income Program comes out of, that comes from personal income tax, corporate tax, other taxes that are just collected as part of the everyday taxation that the government, enforces. People against the people. So, this is where a lot of like similar programs, the Supplemental Security Income Program is a welfare program. It's for low income people, either above a certain age, below the poverty rate. Sometimes they have to be disabled. Sometimes they don't have to be disabled. It could be for children. There are, again, a whole host of other factors that play into whether or not you can participate in this program, but you have to be low income. That is the first basic premise of limited income and resources.
So this is in addition to any Social Security, like any disability payments, they could also do that program?
So like with anything in government, it depends.
Okay.
And there are a whole host of factors that would decide whether a person would be able to get checks from both programs or only from one program or the other program.
State programs and everything.
And I mean, we don't really intercede at the state level, but yes,
But
I mean,
someone could get.
There are a lot of factors, yes, and there are possibilities where folks can get different money coming in from different programs, right?
Okay.
So, as part of this now, we now are using the data that I told you that we're now collecting,
all the equity data,
right, to reach underserved communities in rural and urban areas across the country where we have noted the greatest decline in supplemental security income applications since the pandemic, and where the majority of people living in those zip codes are people of color and or people living at or below the 150% federal poverty threshold, right? So we're now collecting data on the American public. We are interested in your race, right? And based on your race and where you live and or whether or not you are at or below a certain poverty threshold, we are now going to target your community and approach you to apply for a welfare benefit.
To encourage people to get into this program.
This type of, these types of applications, right?
Please let us give you more of the government's money.
There is no law in this country that says it is a crime to not be wealthy. Okay. And I did not go into government service to be wealthy. Yes, I am above the 150% poverty threshold, thank God, and I'm very fortunate for that. But not everybody wants to live the same way.
Right.
And there is nothing wrong with living in a low income community. There are beautiful low income communities that are happy, that
Yeah,
raise their
some of the
children
best
well,
people.
that have values and provide for themselves and for their communities.
But the
But
government,
we are now saying that, there's something wrong with that.
right? The government has to come in and fix this because
Right.
you must be sad and in horrible conditions, and we have to do something about that and make you happy.
We in the federal government are now making a value judgment on the way that our citizens live, as opposed to letting them tell us when they need help.
Right.
And I just feel that that does not align, with American values. And, it's out there. Like, this information is available and nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
So that's the long answer to saying why I think it is so important that, Feds for Freedom has decided to expand our mission to target these types of, like, what I will say are abuses of power at the federal level, that are, targeting our citizens, spending taxpayer dollars inappropriately for things that are totally unnecessary, or for things that only pursue a certain biased agenda, things that collect data on our race and all of these other sort of like preferences that are totally irrelevant to being able to live in a society that is supposed to be diverse and, open about accepting people for their backgrounds, right? Their national origin, their, all of these things.
Yeah.
And so,
Is that considered classist when they have these biases against people who are low income? I mean, so
you said it.
I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you, so as a board member of Feds for Freedom, what is the solution that you think would be to, in this situation that you've presented, what would you want to do about it?
Well, I think knowledge is power, right? And understanding what is happening and knowing about it means that we have an opportunity to fight it and express our displeasure, right? And obviously, this was an executive order issued by the president, right? Not legislation issued by Congress. But there's no reason that Congress can't legislate it out of existence, right?
Right. So we have to bring it to their attention.
Right. So it's about, if you don't want to live in a society where decisions about you by your government are made based on your race or the community that you live in, then you need to put a stop to it.
Right.
And it's every person's responsibility to take action individually and as a group, to let our legislators know that we don't approve of this type of, behavior, to not want our tax dollars to be spent that way.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I guess it all boils down to the grassroots, and Americans caring about their own communities and how they want the federal government to be run.
So essentially what we're offering with our organization is the opportunity and the kind of the vehicle, we can say, for someone like yourself, either in the government or someone who's not in the government, who is aware of these crazy things that they see and maybe feel overwhelmed. Like, how do I do anything about this? They just end up hating the government in general, instead of like feeling like, hey, we should stop this. We should do something about it. Most people don't know what to do at that point when they recognize a problem. What do we do? How do we stop it? Well, write to your congressman. Well, they don't always listen, do they? So really, as an organization, we are creating a base of other people who are willing to band together to, add to the fire, to bring some strength to the argument and bring it to the attention of Congress, and to get more involved in that way. Is that what you're saying? So like, we build the awareness, and then we get a lot more people on board to fight it and figure out what needs to happen to do that.
I mean, things only change if we want them to change,
Right.
right? And I love my agency. As I said, I've loved working there, but I don't agree with everything that we are pursuing. And I don't think that it's good for America.
No.
So I want to continue to serve the American public, but I want to do it the right way.
Right. And we want to represent the American people. You know, we
Right.
want a government that represents them correctly. And I don't think the majority of people want those kind of programs in place and
Right.
feel that's a good use of their tax dollars. Well, thank you so much for being on and for sharing with us your story. And we look forward to hearing more from you maybe in the future and other members of our organization who have things to share that they are seeing. And that's one of the reasons we love this platform and we love the ability to share these stories with others. So for our listeners out there, stay tuned. We will be having more stories and inside information that we know is available to the public, but like Melissa said, is not always brought to their attention and is kind of buried. And so those things need to be known and shared, and we will continue to do that.
Thanks for having me.